All right. So, uh, you sent in this research report, and it's got me thinking.
Oh, yeah.
Plant biology of the Yajurveda. It's pretty fascinating stuff.
Right.
Apparently, this ancient text talks about like over 70 different plants.
Wow, yeah.
But it's not just like, your average plant encyclopedia.
Okay.
The Ayurveda connects these plants to rituals, medicine, even magic.
Yeah, it gives you a really interesting look at how ancient Indian knowledge, viewed the plant world.
Right.
The Yajurveda is one of the 4 Vedas, and it's kind of unique because it's mainly written in prose,
Hmm.
and it's considered the knowledge of sacrifice. It's basically like a guidebook for these rituals.
Okay, rituals. So not exactly like a gardening manual we're talking about here, right?
Not quite. No,
Well,
these
well-
plants weren't just there for decoration. They were
Yeah.
like really vital components in these super elaborate ceremonies.
I see.
And there's this quote from the text that kind of sums it up. One should have reverence and devotion towards trees, forests, and vegetation.
Oh, wow.
And, that reverence is still alive today.
Yeah.
In India, you see people worshiping these specific trees called stalavrikshas.
Dolivrikshas.
Yeah, they believe that these trees are like the dwelling places of gods and goddesses.
Oh, wow. So these trees are like living connections to the divine.
Exactly.
That must make choosing the right tree for a ritual super important.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And these rituals, they were called yajnas.
Okay.
They were designed to get certain outcomes,
Hmm.
like a good harvest or even to ward off sickness.
Mm.
They were really meticulously performed.
Right.
And the plants you chose played a huge role.
Yeah, I was reading in the report about this
Oh, yeah.
this Agni Manthana device,
Right.
and it's used to light the sacred fire, but it has to be made from specific types of wood.
Oh, yeah, it's really interesting.
And each one has its own meaning.
Yeah, it's a great example of how they combine practicality and symbolism.
Yeah.
And actually, the way the Yajurveda classifies plants,
Hmm.
it's surprisingly similar to how we do it today.
Really?
We group them as trees, herbs, climbers, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
The Taittiriya Samhita, which is part of the Yajurveda,
Okay.
they actually have a system based on a plant's form and its growth habit.
So they were like ancient botanists,
Yeah.
figuring all this stuff out thousands of years ago.
That's right.
And what I thought was really cool was this
Yeah.
Smarani Samhita, which
yeah.
talks about life flowing from the earth to water to herbs to flowers and fruit. It's like
Yeah.
they understood that cycle of life and how plants are a part of it.
Yeah, it's amazing how much botanical knowledge is in these texts.
Yeah.
And it's not just about, the physical stuff. They saw plants as being really powerful, even magical.
Right.
We might look at some of those beliefs as kind of, fantastical today,
Yeah.
but it gives us a window into how they saw the world.
Okay, now for the fun part, the magical uses.
Right.
The report talks about using a plant called apamarga in rituals to get this confound enemies.
Oh, wow.
And then there's the Ashvatha tree, which they believed could boost fertility, especially with helping to conceive sons.
It's really fascinating how they connected these plants
Yeah.
to specific wants and needs.
Uh-huh.
Another example is this herb called neli.
Mm-hmm.
They believed it could potentially cure leprosy and even reverse gray hair.
Wow.
These beliefs show just how intertwined plants were with their lives.
Right.
Not just as like physical objects, but as like sources of power and solutions to problems.
Right. So it wasn't all about rituals and magic, though, right?
Right.
They used plants for food, too.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Especially in their ceremonies.
Yeah. The Yajurveda gets pretty specific about which grains and legumes they used in these feasts.
It's true.
They even describe this drink
Oh, yeah.
called sura, made from grains and fruit.
Yeah, those feasts were a way to connect with the divine. It was like a form of offering and thanks.
Right.
Shows how plants were this bridge between humans and the divine world, nourishing both body and soul.
So we've got this ancient text that not only categorized plants in a really complex way, but also put them at the center of rituals, beliefs, and daily life. It's amazing how closely connected those things were.
Yeah. And while we're on the topic of the Yajurveda's plant classification system,
Yeah.
I think it's worth taking a closer look at just how deep that knowledge went.
Okay.
We've said there's 71 plants mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
but it's way more than just a list.
Right.
They grouped these plants together in a way that really shows they were paying close attention to their traits and uses.
Yeah, I'm curious about that. It's easy to say, oh, that's a pretty flower.
Yeah.
But what made them decide to use certain plants for certain things? What was the thinking behind that?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. Their system wasn't just random.
Okay.
They really thought about the form, the growth habits, even the plant's perceived effects. You know,
Mm.
they had categories for trees, shrubs, herbs, climbers, even aquatic plants.
Wow.
That level of detail really shows you they understood just how diverse plants really are.
It's like they were making a botanical database thousands of years before computers.
And it wasn't just a database either.
What do you mean?
It was a framework for understanding the relationships between plants,
Okay.
their uses, and their place in the whole ecosystem.
So it wasn't just about which plants were good for rituals.
Oh,
They were thinking about the bigger picture, about how plants fit into the whole web of life.
exactly.
Right.
And that perspective is reflected in some of the more, how should I put it, unconventional uses they found for plants.
Right, like the magic stuff.
Yeah, remember how we were talking about the magical aspects?
Oh, yeah, like using a pomarga to mess with your enemies. It makes you wonder, like, what did they see that made them think plants had those kinds of powers?
Well, the report mentions this ritual with the Kadira tree,
Okay.
and it was supposed to prevent untimely death.
What?
Yeah, they thought that using a vessel made from this wood in a certain ritual could prolong life
Wow.
and even ward off suicidal thoughts.
That's pretty heavy stuff. It shows that they were dealing with some really serious issues even back then,
Yeah.
and they turned to nature for answers.
It really shows how connected they saw the physical and spiritual worlds.
Right.
Plants weren't just objects.
Hmm.
They were sources of power, healing, and protection.
There's also the Versea tree mentioned in the report.
Right.
And they used it in rituals to ward off evil spirits and again to try to prevent people from dying too soon. It's like they thought these trees had this like protective energy.
It's almost like they imagined this world where the line between the physical and the spiritual was blurry,
Yeah.
where plants could affect both realms.
Right. And that perspective might actually be valuable to us even today.
Maybe.
You know, when you think about those ancient beliefs and what we know now about like the medicinal properties of plants,
Right.
it's almost like they were tapping into something that we're only just beginning to rediscover.
Yeah, it makes you wonder how much knowledge has been lost over time
Mm-hmm.
and what we could learn if we looked at these practices from a modern scientific perspective.
You know, we tend to separate science and spirituality these days, but the Yajurveda seems to be saying that they can go together.
Yeah.
It's like they understood that there's magic in nature even if they didn't have the scientific tools to explain it like we do now.
Right. It challenges us to rethink our whole approach to the natural world and to consider what we might be missing when we only focus on things we can measure.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a whole other way of understanding just waiting for us to discover it.
So we've got this ancient text full of botanical knowledge that's surprisingly detailed and sophisticated.
Is.
And it's not just about identifying plants.
Mm.
It's about understanding their place in the ecosystem,
Right.
their power and their potential to heal and protect.
And it also brings up this really important question.
What's that?
As we explore this knowledge, how do we make sure we're doing it responsibly?
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah.
There are definitely ethical things we need to think about.
Absolutely.
It's not as simple as just reading an old book and saying, hey, this plant can cure this. Let's go exploit it.
No, you're right. There needs to be a lot of respect and understanding.
Yeah. We need to remember the cultural context, avoid biopiracy,
For sure.
and make sure that any exploration benefits everyone, not just a few.
It's like we're holding a piece of history,
Yeah.
and we have to treat it carefully and respectfully.
Exactly. We have to ask ourselves, what can we learn from this ancient wisdom?
Right.
And how can we use it in a way that honors the past,
Yeah?
but also helps us build a better future?
Those are definitely the questions we should be asking as we learn more about the secrets of the Yajurveda.
And speaking of secrets, there's one more thing in this report that I found really interesting.
Well, what's that?
It talks about this idea of plants as teachers, as guides on a spiritual journey.
Ah, yes. The concept of plants as allies, sources of wisdom and guidance. That's something we can definitely talk more about.
Yeah, this idea of plants as teachers, it's such a different way of looking at things.
Huge.
We're so used to thinking of plants as resources, as things we use.
I know.
But the Yajurveda is suggesting that there's something more there,
Yeah.
a deeper connection.
It's a perspective that you find in many indigenous cultures.
Really?
This idea that the natural world isn't just something we take from, but something we can learn from, something that can guide us.
The report mentions how they used certain plants in rituals that were supposed to increase awareness,
Oh, yeah.
to help people see things differently.
It's like they saw plants as tools for spiritual growth.
Yeah, not just for like physical healing.
The Yajurveda talks about how certain plants were used in rituals to reach altered states of consciousness, to communicate with the divine. It makes you wonder, what kind of knowledge or insights were they hoping to find through these practices?
It does.
And what can we learn from that today as we try to figure out our place in the universe?
It makes me think about how in today's world, we're so focused on the external world, on getting knowledge from technology and data.
Yeah.
But maybe there's a whole other kind of knowledge that we can access through experience, through connecting with nature on a deeper level.
The Yajurveda reminds us that sometimes the most profound insights don't come from analyzing things in a lab, but from immersing ourselves in nature, from listening to the wind, from feeling the life in a tree.
Right.
It's about recognizing that there are different ways of knowing, different paths to understanding.
So we've gone on this journey through this ancient text.
We have.
We've discovered its botanical secrets, its ritual practices, its insights into how interconnected life really is.
Yeah, it's been a deep dive into a world that's both familiar and totally foreign.
Right.
A world where science and spirituality are intertwined in these fascinating ways.
What strikes me is how relevant these old ideas feel today.
I know.
As we face the challenges of a changing world,
Yeah.
maybe we can find inspiration in the Yajurveda's message of respect for nature.
Right.
Its focus on balance and interconnectedness.
Right.
It's understanding that plants can heal not just our bodies, but our souls too.
It's a reminder that sometimes the answers we're looking for aren't in the newest scientific discovery, but in the wisdom that's been passed down for generations, in the whispers of the trees, in the rustling of leaves, in the timeless dance of life.
That's a beautiful thought. And it's a perfect place to wrap things up for today.
It is.
Thanks for being with us on this journey. And until next time, keep diving deep. Keep asking questions and keep looking for that hidden wisdom all around us.
I'll see you next time.
All right, bye.
Bye. They had categories for trees, shrubs, herbs, climbers, even aquatic plants.
Wow.
That level of detail, really shows they understood just how diverse plants are.
It's like they were building a botanical database.
Right.
Thousands of years before we had computers.
And it wasn't just a database.
Oh, what was it then?
It was more like a framework for understanding how plants are related. How they're used and where they fit in the whole ecosystem.
So it's bigger than just which plants work for rituals.
Yeah.
They were thinking about the big picture, how everything's connected.
Exactly. And you can see that perspective in some of the more, let's say, unconventional ways they use plants.
Right. The magic stuff.
Exactly. Remember we were talking about those magical aspects?
Oh, yeah, like using a pomarga to mess with your enemies?
Yeah.
What did they even see that made them think plants had that kind of power? I wonder.
Well, there's this one ritual in the report that uses the Kadira tree.
Okay.
And it was supposed to prevent people from dying before their time.
Seriously?
Yeah. They thought if you used a cup made from this wood in a certain ritual, it would make you live longer.
Wow.
And maybe even stop you from wanting to end your own life.
That's some serious stuff,
It is.
Shows they were thinking about life and death way back then.
Yeah.
And looking to nature for answers.
It really shows you how connected they saw the physical and the spiritual.
Right.
Plants weren't just, things.
Right.
They were sources of power, healing, protection.
The report mentions the virala tree, too. They use that in rituals to ward off evil spirits, and again, to stop people from dying too young. It's like certain trees had this protective energy to them.
Almost like they thought the physical and spiritual worlds were kind of blurred together.
Yeah.
And that plants could affect both.
That idea might be helpful to us even now.
You think so?
Well, when you think about these old beliefs and what we know now about how plants can be used as medicine, it's like they were onto something back then.
Maybe they were ahead of their time.
And we're just starting to catch up.
Makes you wonder how much knowledge we've lost over the years.
Right.
And what we could learn if we study these ancient practices with modern science.
It's funny how we separate science and spirituality so much these days.
We do.
But the Yajurveda is like, nope, they go together.
It's true.
It's like they knew there was magic in nature even though they couldn't explain it scientifically.
Right. And that makes us think about how we approach nature.
Yeah.
Maybe we're missing something by just focusing on what we can measure.
Right.
What if there's a whole other way of understanding out there?
So we've got this ancient text.
Yeah.
Filled with this incredibly detailed and advanced understanding of plants.
It is remarkable.
And it's not just about what they are, it's about their place in the ecosystem.
Yeah.
Their power, how they can heal and protect.
But it also raises a big question.
What's that?
How can we explore this knowledge without, messing things up?
That's a good point. There are ethical considerations.
There are.
We can't just read this and say, oh, this plant cures this, let's go exploit it. You can't. Yeah. There has to be respect.
Absolutely.
Notwithstanding.
For sure.
We got to consider the cultural context, avoid biopiracy,
right,
and make sure everyone benefits from this knowledge, not just a few people.
It's like holding a piece of history in our hands.
I like that.
You have to be careful with it.
So what can we learn from this?
Yeah.
And how can we use it in a way that respects the past,
right,
but also helps build a better future?
Those are the questions to think about as we keep learning about the Yajurveda.
Speaking of things to think about, there was one part of the report that really got me thinking.
Oh, what was that?
It talks about this idea of plants as teachers.
Okay.
Like guides on a spiritual journey.
Ah, yes. Plants as allies, sources of wisdom, that kind of thing. We could definitely unpack that more.
Yeah, plants as teachers. It's a pretty wild idea, isn't it?
It is.
We tend to think of plants as, resources.
Right, like things we use.
Exactly. But Yajurveda is saying there's more to it than that.
It is.
It's like a deeper connection.
Yeah, and a lot of indigenous cultures have this idea too.
Really?
That nature is not just something you take from, but something you learn from. It could be a guide for us.
The report talks about these rituals where they used plants to, heighten awareness.
Right.
So people could perceive things differently.
Like they were using plants for spiritual growth.
Yeah, not just physical healing.
The Yajurveda describes how they incorporated certain plants into rituals to induce altered states of consciousness.
Wow.
To communicate with the divine.
It makes you think, what were they hoping to find out with these practices?
It does.
And can we learn anything from that today, as we try to understand our place in the universe?
Right.
Like nowadays, we're so focused on the outside world,
Yeah.
on learning through technology and data.
All the externals.
Yeah, but what if there's this whole other way of knowing?
Right.
That comes from experiencing nature.
Yeah.
Connecting with it on a deeper level.
The Yajurveda reminds us that sometimes the most profound insights don't come from, analyzing things in a lab, right, but from being in nature, listening to the wind, feeling the life in a tree.
It's like there are different ways of knowing.
Absolutely different paths to understanding.
Dude, we've been on this journey through this ancient text.
We have.
Uncovered its secrets about plants,
right,
its rituals, its insights into how interconnected life really is.
It's been quite the exploration.
It has. And what I find really striking is how relevant all this ancient stuff feels today.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Like as we deal with all the challenges of a changing world.
Right.
Maybe the Yajurveda has some answers for us.
Maybe.
Respect for nature, the importance of balance and being connected to everything.
Right.
Remembering that plants can heal not just our bodies, but our souls too.
It's a good reminder that the answers we're looking for sometimes aren't in the latest scientific breakthrough, but in the wisdom that's been passed down for generations.
Right.
In the whispers of the trees, the rustling of leaves, the dance of life.
That's a beautiful way to put it and a perfect way to end our deep dive today.
It is.
So thanks for joining us, everyone. And until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep looking for that hidden wisdom all around you.
See you next time.